I close my eyes, I see children, eyes wide with fear, hands reaching out, not for toys or laughter, but for something far more precious, safety. And in that moment, something deep within me stirs. It is not anger, not pity, but a profound ache, the kind that insists no cry of innocence should ever echo unanswered. These children have no sanctuary. The walls around them crumble. The skies, instead of promising light, thunder with dread. Their playground is rubble. Their lullabies are sirens. Their mornings begin not with hope, but with survival. And yet, within those eyes far too young to know despair, I still glimpse a spark that tells me they have not given up, though the world seems to have given up on them. Every drop of water, every piece of bread, every vial of medicine, these are not luxuries, they are lifelines. Aid is not charity, it is justice. It is the bare minimum we owe to those who endure what no human should. And those who risk their lives to deliver that aid deserve not only our respect, but our protection, for their work is the fragile thread keeping hope alive. But what of the hospitals that lie in ruins? What of the schools that once echoed with laughter, now silenced under dust and stone? What of the families who once gathered around simple meals, now scattered by violence? These are not statistics. They are lives. Lives that demand more than our sympathy. They demand our action. There must be an end to this cycle. A ceasefire is not merely an agreement between leaders. It is a pause in the suffering of children, a chance for families to hold each other without fear, a chance for healing to begin. Without it, each passing day only deepens the wound, and the silence of the world becomes complicit in the pain. And so I ask you, will you stay silent? Will you turn away and let their voices fade into the background of distant headlines? Or will you speak? Will you act? Because history does not forgive indifference. The measure of our humanity is not in the comfort of our lives, but in how we respond to the suffering of others. Let us be courageous. Let us be relentless. Let us refuse to look away. For in standing with those who cannot stand alone, we affirm not only their dignity, but our own. And in that choice, in that act of shared humanity, lies the faint, unbreakable hope that one day children will no longer cry out for safety, but laugh freely under open skies. When I think of what is unfolding, I cannot help but reach back into my own life, into those moments that shaped me, and I imagine what it would mean if the ground beneath me had given way, if the safety I once took for granted had been torn from me without warning. Imagine the faces of my loved ones in place of those I see on the news, the ones covered in dust, the ones straining to breathe through fear, the ones holding each other as though that embrace might be the only shield they have left. That thought cuts deep because it reminds me that the distance between their suffering and my comfort is a thin, fragile thread. It could just as easily have been me or you or any of us. And that is what makes their struggle so unbearable to watch. It refuses to remain distant. I remember the warmth of family gatherings, the simple joy of shared meals, the sound of laughter echoing in safe, familiar rooms. And then I see families in Palestine who long for that same warmth, but instead gather in the shadows of shattered homes, clutching at memories because the present has been ripped apart. When I hear a child cry, I cannot help but think of how instinctively we reach to soothe them, to assure them that the world is not as cruel as their tears might suggest. Yet these children cry into a void where comfort has no place, where their parents, though desperate, cannot promise them safety, cannot promise them tomorrow. That realization strikes me with a weight I cannot shake. I find myself asking what it means to be human, if not to recognize ourselves in the suffering of others. I see fathers who once worked to provide, now digging through rubble with bare hands. I see mothers who once dreamed of their children's futures, now begging only for their survival. And it is impossible not to feel it in my own bones, impossible not to carry a piece of their grief as though it were my own. This is not just their story, it is ours. It is a mirror held up to remind us that pain is universal, that love is universal, and that silence in the face of such suffering diminishes us all. Their cries reach across borders, and when I hear them, I cannot pretend they do not belong to me, too. There is nothing more sacred than a child's right to feel safe. Safety is the ground upon which all other parts of life are built. Without it, dreams cannot form, laughter cannot last, and innocence cannot survive. When I think of the children caught in the turmoil of Palestine, I see faces that should be lit by wonder, yet are instead shadowed by fear. Their games are interrupted by sounds no child should ever hear. Their homes, the places that should cradle them in warmth, are no longer sanctuaries, but fragile walls that cannot protect them from the chaos outside. A child should wake to the scent of breakfast, not the dust of collapsed stone. They should walk to school with books in their hands, not navigate streets broken by violence. Safety is not a privilege, it is a promise we, as adults, owe to every child everywhere. To break that promise is to rob them of more than comfort. It is to steal their very childhood. And yet, despite the danger, their eyes still search for reassurance, for a sign that the world has not abandoned them. It is a haunting truth. Children instinctively look to the adults around them for safety, but when those adults can offer nothing against bombs, hunger, or displacement, the betrayal is more than political, it is human. It wounds not only the child, but the very idea of what it means to protect and nurture life. No child should fall asleep in fear of whether they will wake again. No child should have to learn the language of war before they learn to read. No child should clutch their parents in desperation, begging for safety only to find their parents as helpless as they are. These are not conditions anyone should endure, least of all the youngest among us, whose only role in this world should be to grow, to learn, to love, and to hope. Safety is not a gift we grant them. It is their right. And until that right is restored, until every child can close their eyes without fear, we cannot claim to have done our duty as human beings. When we speak of humanitarian aid, we must understand it not as charity, not as an act of distant goodwill, but as the very breath of survival. In Palestine, where the simplest needs are denied, aid becomes the thin line between life and death. Every bottle of clean water that reaches a child is more than a gesture. It is a shield against disease, a promise that thirst will not claim another young life. Every sack of rice, every loaf of bread is not a token of kindness, but a means of survival, a way to keep hunger from consuming those already weakened by grief. Medicine, too, is not merely medicine. In the midst of shattered hospitals and dwindling supplies, it is a thread that binds life to hope, that keeps a wound from becoming fatal, an illness from becoming a death sentence. Aid workers risk everything to deliver these essentials. They move through broken streets under the weight of danger, not for recognition, but because they understand the truth. Without this lifeline, the people have nothing. And yet even this most basic form of humanity is often obstructed, delayed, or denied. Convoys are halted, supplies are cut off, and the hands that reach out in desperation are left empty. This cruelty is not accidental, it is deliberate, and it deepens the suffering of those who already endure more than anyone should. When we deny aid, we do not simply deny food or medicine. We deny dignity. we deny humanity. But when aid is allowed to flow freely, it becomes more than sustenance. It becomes a message. It tells the people, you are not forgotten, you are not abandoned, and there are those in the world who still see you, who still care. That knowledge alone can be as vital as the aid itself. Humanitarian aid is not about politics. It is not about sides. It is about life. It is about answering the most fundamental question: do we allow people to live, or do we look away and let them perish? And the answer to that question will define not only their future, but ours. When we look at the devastation that has unfolded, it is not only the people who have been wounded, but the very structures that sustain life. Infrastructure is more than concrete, steel, or wires. It is the invisible network that allows a community to breathe. In Palestine, that network has been torn apart. Hospitals, which should be sanctuaries of healing, lie crippled, unable to cope with the flood of the injured. Doctors work in hallways by candlelight. Nurses improvise with dwindling supplies, and families are forced to watch their loved ones slip away, not because their injuries were beyond saving, but because the tools of saving have been destroyed. That is not just tragedy, it is theft. The theft of life that could have been preserved. Water, the most basic of necessities, no longer flows cleanly through pipes. Families search desperately for safe drinking water, while children fall ill from what they consume in desperation. Sanitation systems have collapsed, turning neighborhoods into breeding grounds for disease. Without infrastructure, survival itself becomes a gamble. A child should never have to weigh the risk of drinking water, and yet this is the reality when pipes are shattered and treatment plants lie silent. Education, too, has been silenced. Schools once filled with voices of learning are now rubble, or shelters for the displaced. The loss of classrooms is not only the loss of knowledge, it is the loss of normalcy, of a rhythm that tells children life has meaning beyond survival. Without education, there can be no future. Without the walls that protected it, hope itself erodes. Homes, once places of safety, have been flattened, forcing families into makeshift shelters or the open air. The roof over one's head is more than material, it is identity, belonging, dignity. To take that away is to strip people not only of their safety, but of their very sense of self. Infrastructure is not an afterthought. It is the lifeline of society. Without it, survival becomes a series of desperate improvisations, and the future crumbles alongside the present. To rebuild infrastructure is to rebuild hope. It is to say, you deserve not only to live, but to live with dignity. And until that promise is restored, the suffering will not end. Peace is not a luxury. It is not a dream reserved for the distant future, nor a fragile word passed around negotiation tables as if it were a bargaining chip. Peace is the foundation of life itself. And in Palestine, the absence of it has left entire generations trapped in a cycle of fear, grief, and survival. A ceasefire is not simply a political maneuver, it is a human necessity. It is the difference between a child waking to the sound of birdsong or the thunder of explosion. It is the pause that allows families to bury their dead with dignity, to seek medical care without risking their lives, to drink water without fearing the next strike will sever the source. Without a ceasefire, every day compounds the suffering. More homes are destroyed, more lives are lost, more wounds, both visible and invisible, are carved into the hearts of those who remain. And these wounds do not vanish when the fighting stops temporarily. They linger, shaping the way children grow, shaping how communities rebuild, shaping whether trust in humanity itself can be restored. The longer the violence continues, the deeper the scars run, until what is left is not only devastation of the land, but devastation of the soul. Peace, fragile though it may be, offers something that weapons never can, the chance for healing. Healing of bodies, yes, but also of trust, of community, of hope. It offers parents the chance to imagine a tomorrow for their children, and children the chance to laugh without fear that the sky will betray them. Peace is not the end of struggle, but it is the beginning of possibility. To call for ceasefire is not to take a side. It is to recognize that every bullet fired, every missile launched, every act of violence denies a child their future. It is to declare that human life cannot be measured against political gain, that dignity cannot be sacrificed to the ambitions of power. It is to say enough, to insist that humanity must come before all else. The world cannot stand idle, waiting for peace to arrive as if by accident. It must be demanded, fought for, protected, for without peace there is nothing, and with it there is at least a chance for everything. There comes a moment when silence becomes unbearable, when to remain quiet in the face of suffering is to be complicit in it. That moment has arrived. A call to conscience is not a request for charity, nor is it an appeal to sentiment. It is a demand for humanity to rise to its own reflection. What we witness in Palestine is not distant, not abstract. It is the unraveling of lives that could just as easily be ours. And so the question is not whether we see, but whether we choose to respond. Conscience is that voice inside each of us that whispers when something is wrong, that stirs when injustice is laid bare, that refuses to let us sleep easily when others lie awake in terror. But conscience is useless if it is not acted upon. To feel sorrow and then do nothing is to betray the very essence of empathy. To acknowledge the suffering of children, families, entire communities, and then turn away is to surrender our humanity piece by piece, is contempt. We live in a world where information moves faster than ever. We cannot claim ignorance. We cannot say we did not know. We see the images, we hear the cries, we read the names of the lost. Conscience leaves us no escape, no excuse. The only question left is, will we act? Will we raise our voices when silence is easier? Will we demand justice when neutrality feels safer? Will we stand on the side of life when doing so costs us comfort? History will remember not only the cruelty of those who inflicted harm, but the silence of those who watched it unfold. Future generations will ask where we stood when children begged for safety, when families pleaded for bread, when a people cried out for the simplest dignity. And what will our answer be? That we were too afraid to speak, too consumed by our own lives to notice theirs? A call to conscience is a call to courage. It is a reminder that the measure of our humanity is not found in words, but in deeds, not in sympathy, but in solidarity. To answer this call is to declare that we will not stand by as innocence is erased, that we will not be silent when lives are at stake. To answer this call is to reclaim the very best of what it means to be human. And so as I stand before you, I cannot offer easy answers, nor can I pretend that words alone will heal the wounds carved into the people of Palestine. But what I can offer is this, a reminder that we are bound together, that their struggle is not separate from ours, that their cries for safety echo in every corner of our shared humanity. We cannot undo what has been lost, but we can decide what we will do now, whether we turn away or whether we choose to stand with them, to raise our voices where theirs have been silenced. The children deserve more than rubble for a playground. Families deserve more than fear as their constant companion. A people deserve more than the denial of their basic humanity. The future depends on whether we answer the call of conscience, whether we demand peace, whether we extend the hand of compassion when indifference tempts us to withdraw. Let us not be remembered as bystanders. Let us be remembered as those who chose to see, who chose to act, who chose to honor life when it was most in danger. For in choosing to defend their dignity, we safeguard our own. In standing with them, we prove that the light of humanity cannot be extinguished. Not by war, not by hate, not by silence. The time is now. The choice is ours. Let us rise and let us not falter, for in their survival lies our redemption, and in their hope the promise of a better world.